Namaste, Ammaji. It's Nirmati, and I'm back in Australia. And I thought that given our reading time was so precious for me, and I can see that you really enjoyed it also, that I would keep reading from Australia and send you the recordings so that we can keep having this time together. I'm coming back to the start of your wonderful book, The Rishis and the Rakshashas. So I thought I'd go back to chapter 1 so that it's just always here and you can come back and listen to the story of your life as you wrote it whenever you're ready. So chapter 1, Walls of Skin. I was born into the wrong body, a prison with walls of skin. From the moment self-consciousness dawned at 3 years of age, I realized my distinct identity. I am acutely aware of that point in time. I was an alien, alone, separate from the world around me. This profound experience was created by a mundane incident. My grandmother forced me to hold a baby chicken in each hand for a photograph. My will against hers, and the unfortunate urge of small chicks to defecate in fear, precipitated a precocious sense of self-awareness, separateness, difference, estrangement. This was the theme of my life, at least until I met Swamiji. I was born a foreigner in my native land, comfortable only in my own mind, my own thoughts, or with nature or animals, ill at ease with everyone else. Everyone except my grandmother on my father's side, who loved me to distraction. Later, of course, there were Marilyn and John, and ultimately Swamiji. Swamiji put that feeling into a wider perspective, as he did so many other quirks in my nature. He explained that the word foreigner could mean a forerunner, that is, one who goes before all the others, pioneers, great thinkers, creative and spiritual geniuses, far ahead of their times. Far ahead of their times were forerunners, and hence foreigners, often even to their own people. But that is going ahead of the tale. I detested that feeling. It was fashionable to rebel in those days in the United States, in the 60s when I was a teenager. James Dean and Elvis Presley were romantic misfits. Rebels were glamorous and exciting. But I wanted to be a normal, red-blooded American girl. Yet I wasn't. The worst of it was, I felt a stranger to my own body, to my own skin, as though I had, by some dreadful mistake, put on someone else's shirt or dress or coat. It simply didn't fit. Sometimes I thought maybe I was an alien, someone from another planet, another galaxy, who had just tried on a human body to see how it worked. All of those fingers and toes and other things. Those thoughts were definitely weird, but what could I do when they appeared now and then, irritating and dismal? I don't think most people felt a sense of strangeness about me. It was deeply internalized, covered over with social niceties and conditioned behavior. I was the teacher's pet, had friends, and enough popularity to win contests, cheerleader, the class valedictorian, and secretary. I was successful by American standards, but inwardly, secretly, I knew my own strangeness. I was an alien in the land of my birth and an exile in my own body. Decades later in India, I tried to take conscious control of this vehicle in which I had been sentenced to spend my earthly days. By working hard on yoga asanas and developing grace through the ancient temple dance Bharatanatyam. This gave me some relief. I made my body hold still for hours or willed it to dance in gorgeous geometric patterns. It could go without food for days, even stop its own breath and slow its heartbeat. The age-old disciplines of India made my body feel more familiar to me, gave me a greater sense of ease, as though by practicing asana and classical dance, I had altered my physical measurements to fit my soul. One thing couldn't be changed. That thing was my colour. My skin was so white. White is a terrible colour for skin. That aspect of my alienation, my allergy to the colour of my own skin, developed mainly after I came to India at the age of 23. It became a new foreignness, another alienation to pile on top of all the others. Swamiji had a theory about mankind's white skin. He said all men were brown originally and lived in Asia. Some developed a skin disease, leukoderma, and became albinos, stark white with red eyes. Because of this, they were outcasted, driven out of society, pushed further and further north into the cold climates, where the sun was not so bright and could not hurt their sensitive eyes. Swamiji said that this is how the white race was formed. According to him, all white people were descendants of those diseased albinos. One can see many albinos in India, and they do look exactly like the white Westerners, except for their red eyes. Like most of Swamiji's theories, this one proved very controversial, so he didn't talk much about it. Only in our private satsangas, some of Swamiji's Western students got offended by this theory and left the ashram, but personally, I myself think there is a lot of truth in it. After my arrival in India, I felt very conscious of my embarrassing whiteness. White skin is not very attractive after all, especially when one sees it on others, like the tens of thousands of Westerners moving around the subcontinent. Many Indians see the Westerner not as a white man, but rather as having a ruddy or red complexion. Most do after a few days spent unprotected in the glare of India's hot tropical sun. Sunburnt red, lobster red, what a sight! Compared to the soft shades of the brown masses moving in great herds through the streets, the occasional burst of white skin is disturbing. That happens to be the colour of skin into which I was born. I was also born into a tall 5'7" frame, with large feet and hands. I don't feel like that inside. I feel my evolutionary trajectory. I feel small and light and brown, with delicate bones and sensitive hands and feet. Somewhere in my evolutionary trajectory, I made a big mistake and chose the wrong body. Even now, as I pass 73 years of age, I feel my body is the wrong shape and size. Most of the time, these thoughts rumble along in my subconsciousness, way down in the chittavritti, and are locked up securely in the basement of mind. But sometimes they blow their lids. I remember one day very vividly when that volcano erupted in 1989, about 3 years after we had been invaded. That day, just a small spark caused the bottled up pressure to explode like an atomic bomb. How many times in my decades in India had this same thing happened? Those moon-faced impish children, filled with primitive, uneducated glee. I'd always taken it as a joke and laughed and smiled and found wide-toothed smiles radiating back at me, lifting such encounters into merry pranks, jokes between comrades. But that day it was different. The festering wound had not healed, even in 3 years, and into that lacerated, burnt flesh the child had unwittingly thrust its innocent lance. "Velakachi, Velakachi," the naked imp had cried with joy, pointing a muddy finger at me as I sped by on my moped. "A white-skinned lady, a white-skinned lady," he had shouted, exuberant and loud. The 4-year-old with matted, unoiled hair and only a black cord knotted about his middle was transported with merriment at the sight of the strange phenomena, an oddity, a foreign object intruding into the little box of his limited world. His cry held no malice. it was just a childish indictment. Here was something different than himself, different from his father and his mother and his brothers and sisters and aunties and uncles. They all had the same smell, but here was a strange odour. Here was an object of great curiosity. A lady all covered with white skin, from head to toes, so starkly unlike his own flat brownish black that he reacted involuntarily, impulsively, instinctively to the utter alienness of it all. That day his shout was oil in the fire of my sizzling raw nerves. I braked my moped and strode on my long legs over to the tiny tot, who stood transfixed with terror at my immensity, at my dazzling whiteness. I pointed a long square finger at him and shook it with anger. And you, my little friend, are a Karpakachi, a little black-skinned boy, and I am going to beat you. Adipen. The baby recovered enough to emit a horrendous howl and fled back to the darkness of his hut, back to the arms of his protecting mother, back to the security of the known, the familiar smells and the safety of his own small box. A large crowd gathered, like the sudden appearance of ants when a grain of sugar falls. It had become dangerous. I quickly sped away, disgusted with myself. But the bitter taste I could not spit out for the rest of that tarnished day. It was an iron curtain, this colour barrier, these walls of skin. Such a deep, primitive divide. Barriers and walls, walls of skin. What a queer phase. Walls of skin. It was part of a Zen koan, a contemplative exercise I had used in my first ingenious attempts to break the barrier of mind. I hadn't thought of it for years. That Zen exercise, imagine yourself to be an empty room with walls of skin. Oh, blessed irony! That Zen koan could encapsulate the tragic human condition on another level into mystic emptiness. 3 years ago, here in modern secular India, my skin had become a wall, insurmountable, the wall of an impenetrable prison. A wall of skin, a wall of skin. It was only in India that I became acutely aware of the tone, the colour, and the shade of skin, and the vital importance these subtle nuances cast on one's destiny. Skin colour not only denoted caste, place in the social hierarchy, but also determined one's fate. Chatusvarna is another term for the 4 castes, but varna literally means colour. The higher the caste, the lighter the colour of skin. The lowest of the low, the outcast, the chandalas, usually are as black as African Negroes, carrying the legacy of ancestors who slaved from dawn to dusk in the hot tropical sunburnt fields. The highest of the high, the Brahmins, the priests, lived generation after generation in the cool stone inner precincts of the ancient temples, hardly seeing the sun except at auspicious moments in connection with appropriate pujas. Their skins were pale, untouched by the fierce, burning midday rays. The colour spectrum of skin runs from the densest, flattest black of the outcastest South Indian to the lightest, fairest, near white of the Kashmiri Brahmins, with an infinite number of shades in between. There is a madness for the light, soft brown shades of skin, not, of course, going so far as the colourless albino white of the Northern Europeans, but more for the rather peachy brown, a subtle tint of brown in a luminescent skin. Marriage advertisements stand witness to this madness. Young men in the matrimonial columns of the nation's newspapers demand fair complexioned brides. The bride can be tall, she can be short, she can be fat, she can be lean, but never, never in a million years can she be black. My friends on this count always amused me. No description of an associate was complete without a reference to his skin colour. You know, that fair fellow, or more commonly, you know how I mean, the black one. They love to comment, "Oh, she has such nice features. It's a shame that she is so black after all." Black is definitely not beautiful, and even if one looks like an African queen, black is tainted with untouchability. And that is all there is to say, even in the so-called modern casteless society. Still and all, to be hovering as I am at the other end of the colour spectrum, embarrassingly white, was equally disgraceful. Did my friends behind my back describe me as that white lady? To be without colour is also to be without caste, a Ferengi, a foreigner, a Yavana, someone who has no caste at all. I had never given much thought to the colour of skin growing up on the plains of South Dakota in the Midwestern United States. A deep golden brown tan in summer was a matter of prestige. The one sole Negro who for some obscure reason had chosen to live out his last days in our small prairie village never registered in my consciousness as a black man. I was well aware of his strangeness, his broad facial features, his thick lips, his wide nose, the intricate kinkiness of his hair, but the colour of his skin had somehow not been important to my childish mind. Walt Whitman could have been talking about India when he wrote, "I contradict myself. Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes." Here whiteness and fairness of skin was a relative concept. I have a Kashmiri friend, nearly as light-skinned as me, though possessing those fine, delicate bones of her royal ancestors. When she goes to market for shopping, she is often asked the stock question, fired by every foreigner: "What is your native place?" Two of my young dance students, Usha and Brinda, fair enough to pass as Italian or Greek girls, also had to suffer the ignominy of being called velakachis when they walked past children in the huts of the outskirts of town. My friend Jagadesan, a Tamilian Brahmin, is fair enough to pass for a New Yorker. In the bigger cities where short cropped hair has replaced the long single plait, and blue jeans and t-shirts are common dress for college boys and girls alike, it is no longer so simple to make out who is a foreigner and who is not. At a certain level, the colour bar becomes a thin line indeed. For that matter, the word foreigner itself has a very broad meaning in the subcontinent. Almost everyone is a foreigner to someone else. There is such a loose conglomerate of diverse cultures, castes and creeds. 16 major languages, hundreds of dialects, thousands of castes and subcastes, not to speak of the immense regional differences in dress, speech, custom, food and culture. All this makes it difficult to identify a single national thread on which the concept of Indianness can be strung. The government had managed to come up with one years ago and emblazoned its brainchild on billboards, on the back of lorries, and over the national television and radio networks. Be Indian, buy Indian. A national concept based on materialism and consumerism. The Rishis must have cringed in their samadhis. There are so many divisions, the lines of castes and colour are the most grossly obvious ones. In times of peace and harmony, the vital differences remain submerged, camouflaged by smiles and laughter, and the daily business of life and interdependence of community living. But let a quarrel erupt, let a misunderstanding occur, and the barriers rise in an instant, shields behind which everyone can hide, walls from behind which diversive missiles can be dispatched. What can you expect? He's Tamil. The Tamils are all like that. Dirty, cunning, dishonest. The Malay from Kerala would say after a quarrel with the Tamil shopkeeper. Behind the door of his shop, the shopkeeper would mutter, "What can you expect after all? He's a Malayali. They are all a bunch of crooks, thieves and scoundrels down there. So on and on it can go, ad infinitum, substituting words and religious labels like Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jain, Sikh, Buddhist, or the linguistic groups Tamil, Malayali, Rajasthani, Bihari, Bengali, Marwati, Hindi, and or the castes Brahmin, Kshatriyan, Vaishya, Shudra, Harijan. The pejorative labels are endless, the divisions are infinite, and thus the foreigners residing in India are legion. We Brahmins are considered foreigners here in Tamil Nadu, Jagadesan complained. Jagadesan. To me many years ago. Highly frustrated, a brilliant scholar, he was unable to get admission into an engineering college because the majority of seats in the universities were reserved for scheduled castes. If my mother or my sister go to the market, and if they dare to wear their 6-yard saris tied in our traditional Brahmin way, they have to endure so many jeers and taunts. I myself have to suffer it when I walk on the street. The urchins, the rickshaw-wallahs, the layabouts will insult me and say, "Go away from here, you foreigner. Go back where you came from." Where did we come from? For 20 generations our people have lived here. If we are not Tamilians, who are we? Jagadesan could recite the names of each one of those male ancestors for 20 generations. His family had lived in Tanjavur, just a few hundred kilometers from Chennai, where he had now settled. If we are not Tamilian, then pray tell me, who are we after all? He said in vexation. Years ago, I had seen the crude graffiti on the walls. Brahmins, get out. We don't want foreigners here. I had heard raucous shouts at political meetings. I knew what Jagadesan said was true. He could not escape the discrimination either. His skin colour and sharp features gave him away. Anyone looking at him knew immediately he was a Brahmin. When it comes right down to it, I'm not really all that white. Many of my Brahmin friends are as light as me. Once in a while, I am mistaken for a Brahmin. I relish that, for I do admire that dignified, cultured caste. It is actually a race unto itself, much like the long-suffering Jews. Swamiji claimed that the Jewish race originated from South India. He said that Abraham was in actual fact a Brahmin, and his wife Sarah was the woman dressed in a sari. Swamiji said Abraham and Sarah had come from Salem in South India, where they established Jerusalem, or the New Salem. History is full of such quirks and is really much stranger than the historians with their dull, dry dates and litanies of battles won and lost would have one believe. It wasn't so far to North Africa from the southwestern coast of India, and trade between the continents had been going on for thousands of years. Once in North Africa, Abraham's descendants mutated their Hindu culture to fit their desert environment. There is a striking similarity between the Jewish people and the Brahmins. In those days, I usually moved about the streets, wrapped in a sari with the customary nose ring, ear studs, gold chain around my neck, bangles on my wrists, and flowers in my hair. My round red bindu centered carefully in the middle of my broad forehead. I elicited curious stares from passers-by. Often they drew me into conversation, being as curious as magpies. But as soon as I opened my mouth to answer the volley of questions, my inquisitors would break into huge grins. "I knew it, you're a foreigner, after all. It's certain from your American accent." It was like a game of "I got you." This annoyed me immensely. I would snap back, "How do you know I've not just studied in America? Maybe I am foreign returned." But they were right. It wasn't just the colour of my skin and the shape and size of my body, but the strange rhythms and accents in which I spoke, which marked me as one apart. I had compensated through the years for the immense burden of an American accent and spoke distinctly, slowly, adopting all the English words like lorry instead of truck, petrol bunk instead of gas station, and ground floor instead of first floor, lifts instead of elevators, and loo instead of toilet. Still, an accent was an accent and also made one a stranger. Nowadays, you can't tell who is who by their accents. I'm shocked myself to hear American accents coming out of Indian bodies. Many fellow dance students in Chennai years ago were American-born Indian girls who had come home to grandmother's house for the summer to savour their roots. Occasionally, I would close my eyes just for fun as they spoke, and visions of little Jewish girls from the Bronx and Midwestern kids from Chicago and Southern belles from Georgia and Mississippi would float to my mind. I felt it so incongruous to open my eyes again and see the classic, refined Indian features set in a very fair complexioned face, the straight Brahmin noses and finely etched mouth and large luscious black eyes distort when the mouth opened and all the experiences, symbols, rhythms, and thought patterns of materialistic, mechanical modern America came rushing out. Listening to their talk gave me a smug satisfaction. They too were in the wrong bodies. They should have been tall and large-boned with big hands and feet and dazzling white skin. I was not the only one caught in an evolutionary quirk. The manner in which the English language is spoken is also a class and caste measured in India, every bit as much as it is in the mother country, which had trained its conquered subjects well. Generations under the British Raj have conditioned the upper class educated, wealthy Indian to have a polished British accent, with perfect, flawless pronunciation. It is difficult to distinguish an English announcer on BBC from an Indian broadcaster on Akashvani when one turns on the radio. So it isn't just the colour of one's skin which gives away one's caste, one's nationality, one's race or social background, which determines one's acceptability or untouchability. It is also the manner in which one speaks, the accent, the tone, the enunciation, the rhythms of the social level to which one belongs. The primordial game of who are you and are you friend or foe, and are you one of us or an outsider, and are you higher or lower than I on the social scale, which the human race loves so well, becomes more intricate than could be imagined in the context of modern India. The times are changing. They are changing fast. Perhaps even faster here in India than in the Western, so-called progressive countries, as though everyone wants to make up for lost time, to catch up in a hurry to the rest of the world. Changes which had taken the United States and Europe half a century to make are occurring here in 5 years. The consumer culture is here to stay, and its fallout is as pervasive as radioactivity from an atomic blast. On one level, at the top, barriers are crashing down. Caste, creed, linguistic, regional, and new barriers based on wealth and job prestige are being erected. It is becoming more difficult to tell who is who, as short cropped hair, blue jeans, sneakers and t-shirts, fast food and disco engulfs the younger generation. Even the most die-hard questioner would have a tough time on the streets of New Delhi, ferreting out a foreigner, especially if she wore a sari, a bindu, and put flowers in her hair, especially if she took care to keep her mouth shut and only smiled mysteriously in answer to the most provocative questions. My mind often engaged itself on these thoughts in those days. It was a minor aberration, an old obsession, a mad desire to be considered an Indian. I had even laboriously traced my father's family back through Czechoslovakia to Bengal, where the ancestral name was a river, the Tamasa, which flowed through the region and was also considered a name of Kali, the destructive, violent aspect of the goddess. My family on my father's side were as dark-complexioned, black-eyed and haired as any North Indian, and as children our long plaited hair and dark eyes and skin had earned us the epithet Indian among our schoolmates. The Indians they referred to, though, were of the American variety. That's chapter 1, Ammaji. I hope you enjoyed it, and you can listen to it as many times as you like.